I'm Greg Wheatley, and my guest today on Inside Wheaton is Dr. Noah Toly. Dr. Toly is Associate Professor of Urban Studies and Politics and International Relations at Wheaton College and serves as Director of CUE, the Center for Urban Engagement. And that primarily is what brings us to this conversation today. Noah, it's good to have you back.
Good to be here, Greg.
Been a number of months since you were here, and it's good to see you across the table again. So CUE is the Center for Urban Engagement, and you are involved in urban studies. Sounds like this is a hand-in-glove kind of situation.
That's right. Yeah, CUE launched in January. It's a really exciting initiative. We conceived it as a way to bring greater coherence, greater sense of purpose and clarity of purpose, and a greater visibility to the things we're already doing in this area, which included, for example, the urban studies major and minor, the Wheaton in Chicago program, a number of other programs that we run ourselves, programs in partnership as well, and then also as a platform for new initiatives, things that we may be starting now or that we may have an opportunity to do in the future. And so far, so good with the launch.
One of the things I noticed as I was looking into this, the background for this conversation, this actually fulfills one of Jonathan Blanchard's visions of all things. You go back that far. And if I understand it right, he strategically felt like Wheaton was located near a major city for a reason.
Yeah, that's right. He was asked, I think it was the occasion of his 80th birthday, he was asked, why did he found a college in Wheaton? And he had a two-part answer. And the first part, I don't remember as a quote, but it had something to do with the fact that the property was for sale. So this was a very pragmatic part of the answer.
Right.
But the second part of his answer was very visionary. He said, because Wheaton is near Chicago, the gate city between the Atlantic and the Pacific, between Western Europe and Eastern Asia. And in fact, at the time it was. It was the biggest city in the western, what was then the western part of the United States.
Crossroads of America, right? Or
the crossroads of America.
Yeah.
New York would have been the biggest port city on the East Coast, already the financial center of the East, but really much more connected with Western Europe. If you wanted to traverse from New York or London to Asia and you were coming west, you were going through Chicago.
Yeah.
And he saw that as an opportunity. And that informed his vision of education. How is it that we should be involved, or our students should be involved specifically, with the rest of the world? And that was through Chicago.
Talk a little bit, Noah. Let's set the scene in terms of urban studies, urban ministry. Why do we care anyway? And I know that the world is really going to the city, isn't it?
Yeah. Right now, we're undergoing a major demographic shift. We're now over 50% urban in terms of the world's population for the first time in history. And that's only projected to increase. Some people say 70% urban or more by 2050. Some people think we may even reach that mark by 2035, 2040. That's a stretch, but it's a possibility. And so our students will really graduate into the most urban world we've ever known. They're likely to live in cities, more likely to live in cities than any other part of the world. And we need to prepare them for their life in that city and also to interact with what the city means for the rest of the world. What does urban life mean for us today?
Is that largely, are people moving there or the city sprawling so that they're taking in, or some of both maybe?
It's both. Yeah. There are people migrating to the city from non-urban areas. There's obviously natural population growth through birth rates and lower death rates in the city. And then there are cities that are sprawling, or even cities emerging from whole cloth in places where there weren't cities before.
Yeah.
And that's especially true in Asia, where you have a number of planned cities, in China, also Korea, where people have said they've marked out a territory where there is currently not a dense human settlement and said, we're going to have a new city here in 5 years. And in some places, they have the wherewithal to do that. In most other parts of the world, it's through sprawl, though, just the city becoming bigger and bigger and bigger. Yeah. And I don't mean sprawl in the worst sense of that word.
Right.
Sometimes there are negative connotations.
Well, we can see a little bit of it in Chicago.
Sure.
You see the western expansion, if you will,
right.
of some of the city, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Let's talk a little bit, Noah, before we talk about the Center for Urban Engagement and what that's about. Talk about a theology of the city. I think people who have grown up either rural or suburban maybe have not grappled with this as much, but as Christians, there's a whole sense in which the city is important, isn't there?
Yeah, I mean, you can see this in Scripture. The city is definitely a motif that comes up over and over, and even a note that Scripture ends on, which many people have pointed out many times, that it, in a sense, it starts in a garden, ends in a city. You could say it starts in a garden and ends in a garden city, if you want to appropriate some urban
That was the name of a town near where I grew up, by the way.
Garden City, yeah. Was that New Jersey?
Michigan, actually.
Okay, Michigan.
Yeah.
And so, there's a sense in which we can get that straight from drawing on Scripture. There's also a sense in which the Christian tradition gives us many resources to draw upon to address some of the issues, the causes and consequences of the urban condition, and the presence and influence of the city in the world that we see today. And one of the things I think I'd want to say is that the city is a form of human community, a particularly dense form, with all sorts of infrastructure as well. Population density and infrastructure are two of the big markers of urban life that allow people to overcome what we might call the tragic dimension of human existence, that is the impossibility of having all things you want at once. And they can do that in healthy ways or not so healthy ways.
Yeah, interesting.
Right? Communities can do it in ways where they're actually absorbing costs so that others may benefit, or they can do it in ways so that they're benefiting themselves and displacing the costs onto others. And I think that's one of the things we need to think about when we consider our own cities.
Is it fair to say, and this is going to be an oversimplification, but fair to say that the city would provide a context in which the best is the best and the worst can be the worst in some ways, with that dense grouping of people, right?
Sure. Yeah, you can see quite a bit of, I think, what some folks have been tempted to say is it's just a product of the city, the best of humanity. I think that can end up idolizing the city a little bit. Yeah. But you can also see, as you say, in some cases, the worst come out. And I think you can see that when we talk about cities and religion, for example. There used to be this idea that cities actually were places where they were bastions of secularization. And that's just not true. I mean, what we see actually in cities is increasing, in lots of cases, religious intensity. And the question is, well, does that religious intensity lead to fundamentalism, radicalization, and conflict? Or does that religious intensity bring the best out in our religious traditions and help us to reach out to others? And I think there are examples on both sides.
Let's talk about Q. So this is sort of, if I understand you right, this is kind of, it's not just brand new. I mean, it's sort of taking what Wheaton's already been doing and sort of giving it some shape and centralizing it, right?
That's exactly right. You can see that with our people and our programs. And so I'll talk about both a little bit. With our people, we have brought together 13 core and supporting faculty and also staff, in addition to those 13, from across the college. So we have supporting faculty from every academic division of the college, which is pretty amazing.
Yeah.
We have that because we had good work going on already in research and teaching when it comes to cities and urban life. Nobody would have known this if they'd gone to the college's website before January. Before January, you would have had to drill down to each individual faculty member and ask the question, are they doing work on cities? Now we've been able to pull that group together and highlight the good work going on. The same can be said with our programs. We have 5 core programs. The Urban Studies Major, the Urban Studies Minor, Wheaton and Chicago are the first 3, and they're things we've already been doing. But we're also adding public lectures that we're going to do more of and differently, so much so that they're really new, and a colloquium series for our faculty. That's also new, which will create a community of faculty, help that faculty not only be more visible to the public, but visible to each other and helpful to each other, and to grow together in the mission, supporting the mission of Q and the mission of the college as well.
Talk a little bit, Noah, about this cross-discipline idea, because I noticed on the website you have people from the arts. You've got one of my musician colleagues. You've got visual art, a couple of visual artists. What's the purpose of that?
That's a great question. What we're doing at Q, our mission, let's say, is to promote just, sustainable, and flourishing urban communities through the academic study of cities and transformational experiences of urban life. And if we're going to take that broad of an agenda seriously, we really need to bring in people from all over campus. So we have a natural scientist who works in environmental science, environmental studies, someone who does primarily air quality things in his own research, but is able to touch on lots of aspects of sustainability and environmental justice, things that are important to urban communities. We also have, as you pointed out, an ethnomusicologist and 2 art faculty, one who does art history, one who does community art. Partly because art and architecture and music and the arts in general are such an important part of what a city is, what a city produces, how it becomes the kind of community that it is. Community art has the power to transform parts of the city or to empower communities. And I think we need to recognize that. And by bringing all these people together in one place, we not only recognize it, but we put them in conversations with others like our economists and political scientists, who we normally think of as part of urban studies, in order to enrich those conversations.
Talk a bit about a student's experience with all of this. And now we go back probably to the urban studies major and so forth. You officially have a location in downtown Chicago as well as here at Wheaton. Talk about how that works for a student.
Yeah, that's a great question. In fact, for a student, you can start your experience at Wheaton in the city, which is pretty amazing. One of our key programs in partnership is a program in partnership with with Passage, which is run by Honey Rock. There's an urban track of that. People know the wilderness track really well. Right. They know the camp track really well. But for the past 4 years or so, we've run an urban track of that has been growing and doing absolutely terrifically. So students can come to Wheaton and start out with a week of service and getting to know their classmates in the city and getting to know Chicago itself. They then can join the urban studies major if they want to go really deeply into this subject, or they can join the urban studies minor if they don't want to go quite as deeply or they have another major that's part of their calling. Both of those sets of students, majors and minors, as well as others, would do Wheaton in Chicago, which would take them back to Chicago for a semester, 16 weeks there with an internship and coursework in advanced coursework in theology, advanced coursework in urban studies, a course called Race, Poverty, and Reconciliation, for example. And students who want to go even further than that also have the option of our new Urban Leadership Studio, where they lead a vocational discernment and exploration program for their peers. They facilitate that conversation in the fall. So we've really found a way to embed urban experience, transformational experiences of urban life, as our mission puts it, in the student experience from day one, or really day minus 14, all the way until graduation.
Yeah, wonderful. I noticed, too, from your website that you have other locations, or you partner with other locations, urban locations. Talk about how that works.
Sure. We have several partnerships that are active. The oldest partnership we have right now that's active is with Honey Rock for Passage, which I just mentioned. But we also have partnerships with the Office of Christian Outreach to add an approved summer program to the Wheaton in Chicago experience. So a student can have a 6-month urban experience, and we help them bring that together in a way that's more than the sum of its parts. So we give it more coherence, more clarity, more of a sense of purpose, and a way to hang together. We also have partners we had a partner last year in Lincoln, Nebraska, Community Development and Public Health Organization there. We're developing partnerships overseas. I'll be traveling this summer to Spain to look into a possible partnership. One of our other faculty will be traveling to London to look at that as well. And we're in conversations with possible partners right now in Denver, Portland, and Houston.
I can't resist asking you this since I have you in here and we're talking about cities and urban issues. All over the news these days, we're seeing issues of race pop up again. I think when some of us thought it's just naive to think we're in a post-racial culture, isn't it? Can you talk about that a little bit and what students might confront in their studies in urban centers and how this might be a very timely thing? Sure.
Yeah, I think that last semester was a really hard one for our Wheaton and Chicago students. You had the happenings in Ferguson, also in New York, in Cleveland. unrest and dis-ease all around the country with those things, and I think rightly so. People were just uneasy with that. When we're here in Wheaton, we have the ability, I think, to compartmentalize that. And
it's out there somewhere.
Yeah, it's out there somewhere. And when we want to turn on the news and when we want to write about it, when we want to deal with it, we can. And then we can turn it off if we want to and deal with something else. Our Wheaton and Chicago students don't have that option. They're in the world's 6th ranked global city, one of the most diverse cities in the world, a city that's been marked by serious racial tension since its beginnings, really, and quite a bit of ethnic conflict. And a lot of our students are actually in internships where they're living out those tensions every day, or they're working with people who are living them out every day. They don't have the option of compartmentalizing that. And that makes it very difficult any semester. But it was especially challenging last semester to reckon with those issues. And it really required a lot of them. And I'm proud of the way that they handled it. I'm glad that they learned a lot from it, but we still have a long way to go.
Yeah. You talk a little bit, Noah, about some of the people who have come through urban studies and where they've landed, maybe some of the things they're saying now on the other side of the major and the ways the major has helped them.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess 5 recent alums come immediately to mind just because of a couple emails and then a dinner that I had recently with 3 of them. We have an alum who is currently working in the Army Corps of Engineers and who is an urban planner working with the Army Corps of Engineers on the impact of climate change on communities, especially communities near military bases. And that's a very interesting project that goes back to her days developing GIS skills, Geographic Information System skills, as part of her internship in Wheaton and Chicago. We have another student currently graduating from a planning program who's had a terrific fellowship, actually doing planning efforts in Chicago. And then I met with 3 alums last week. One of them is working with a venture philanthropy organization in Chicago, doing great work, identifying nonprofits that are making a big difference in their communities and supporting them. Another one is working as a publicist with University of Chicago Press and has charge of publicity for sociology and history books, so does quite a bit of work with urban studies books. And then the final student is a community artist who is in charge of a cultural arts program in the city of Evanston, making a big difference in empowering parts of that community.
Yeah. So it's working.
It's working. Oh yeah, our students do a fantastic job on the job market, and then when they're done, they're constantly reporting to me how big a difference their course of studies and specifically their time in Wheaton and Chicago has made for them.
If somebody's listening today and they think, wow, this might be for my student or for myself, best way to get some information about the major and what goes on here?
Yeah, that's a great question. Now we can go to a really easy URL, which is wheaton.edu/Q. CUE.
Right? Okay,
exactly.
Good.
And they can also call us at 630-752-5730.
Okay, great. Noah, great to have you here. Thank you so much.
Great to be here, Greg. Thanks.
Dr. Noah Toly is Associate Professor of Urban Studies and Politics and International Relations and Director of the fairly new CUE. That's the Center for Urban Engagement. For Inside Wheaton, I'm Greg Wheatley.